I've been investing in real estate for over 22 years, and this might be the most powerful tool I've ever used, and it costs less than $1 per day. As you've probably guessed, that tool is AI, and specifically for me, that's ChatGPT. Now, this isn't going to be a tech tutorial where I share my screen and share all the prompts I'm using. Although if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know in the comments below. This is a Friday edition of the podcast. I call it Coach's Corner, where it's more informal and I just riff on topics that are on my mind. And in this case, I want to walk you through how I'm using ChatGPT as a real estate investor every single day to help me make better, faster, and more creative decisions. I'm going to explain this in 5 different areas where I find myself using ChatGPT the most in my real estate investing business. Number 1, acquisitions. So buying new properties, evaluating new properties. Number 2, property management, including maintenance. Number 3, insurance and legal documents. Number 4, systems and administration, kind of running your day-to-day business. And then number 5, portfolio and kind of big picture thinking, big picture strategy as a real estate investor. And we're going to start with number 1, acquisitions. As you probably know, acquisitions is one of the ways you make the most money in real estate investing. This is how you buy new deals, making sure you evaluate them well, analyze them well. So I want to give you a few examples of how I've used it. And I feel like I'm just scratching the surface with acquisitions. But one way I've done it is in market analysis. So I invest in Clemson, South Carolina, and the areas around me. So I know those areas pretty well, but I do a lot of coaching and RPM in our community with other investors. And so, for example, recently, I had an investor who I was coaching. He was looking at both Louisville, Kentucky, and also Lakeland, Florida. And he lives near Lakeland. And we were trying to decide, he was looking at new construction, kind of turnkey rentals at both locations. And Louisville was a little bit more of a cash flow market. The rent to price ratios were better than Lakeland, which was more of a growth market. It's right between Tampa and Orlando. And there's no right or wrong here. Like there could be reasons to invest in either one. But on the surface, it looked like, hey, Louisville is better. I'd have to go long distance, but I think I could get a better rent to price ratio, at least at first. But we looked at several things just by asking ChatGPT to give us a quick analysis. And so it went through and I asked prompt questions like, can you give me the last 10 years of appreciation rates in Louisville and then compare that to Lakeland? And then I even went back 20 years and asked them about that. Then I asked more general questions to ChatGPT about what are some of the growth prospects? Give me the pluses and minuses of Louisville, its current economy, talk about its current population growth. We did the same thing for Lakeland. And when we summarized all this, just a series of questions, it kind of came down to Lakeland had a much better long-term growth prospect in the next 5 to 10 years than Louisville did. Louisville actually was very solid as well, but it could be a little bit more flat. Population was either going to be flat, maybe even going in certain parts, going down a little bit. And so in his case, because he was local, finding a deal that might have been a little bit worse on the rent to price ratio, but it was local and had the tailwinds of some really good growth, fit his strategy better. He was a super busy professional, and based on the strategy that we had chosen for him, Lakeland just made more sense. So we used it sort of as an analysis, assistant to help us think through our market analysis in that case. So we had the framework, we had the ideas we wanted to use, but then it helped us use that analysis. I've done the same thing with deal analysis, like on a deal by deal basis. We have a course right now that we're going through called 90 Days to Your Next Deal inside of Rental Property Mastery. And also some other students are going through it with us. And we introduced something called a quick and dirty analysis. This is basically like back of the envelope math. And so I would use ChatGPT to help me find some of the key values like the ARV, after repair value. You can use Zillow and look at some of that, but sometimes you want to compare multiple properties or have ChatGPT like go through a list of properties with you and compare and say, hey, is this one better than this one? Or can you help me objectively compare these 5 properties? Like are we doing an appraisal or doing a comparative market analysis? So we'll look at ARV, we'll look at rents, doing the same thing and kind of brainstorm with ChatGPT on rent value. And then if you have some basic numbers, like when I do a back of the envelope math or quick and dirty math, I might try to use for a rental property, say, what is my return on cost for this property? And assuming I had a 40% expense ratio. So you'll give it some assumptions and just let it do some math for you as you're having a discussion. Or, hey, I think I'm going to flip this property using my typical flip formula of 70% minus the repair cost. What would the value be? What should I pay? What's the most I should pay on this deal? Again, I'm not going to go and use this as my final number, but just really quickly, you can have a discussion, an ongoing discussion, and it can bring in facts. And it's just the quickness of that and the depth of understanding that the ChatGPT can be really helpful in these kind of quick and dirty analysis that you do all day long when you're looking at deals. And then finally, I use advertising and marketing. I use ChatGPT a lot in my Coach Carson business. Like I'll write one article or one newsletter, and then I'll say, hey, can you repurpose this into a Facebook post, into an Instagram post? You can do the same thing with real estate investing. You can use it if you're doing that kind of marketing, but more typically for someone who's doing off-market marketing is you might want to write a letter, write a postcard. And so you can say, here are 5 examples. Like you could collect examples from other investors. So here's 5 examples. Can you rewrite a first draft of a letter for me in my voice? You can share some examples of some of your writing, and it'll help you write content like very quickly. And then you can edit it and draft it. And so the other cool thing is it has all the knowledge of anything that's public online, best teachings, best practices of marketing, of deal analysis. And so you can use that to help you write letters, help you write postcards, or to evaluate the postcards and letters that you're using. So in all these cases, the more training you give it, like here's the best example of how I run the numbers, or here's a really good example of the type of marketing I like, you can refine its taste, and it can give you better feedback based on what you fed it. The second area I find myself using AI a lot in my real estate business is property management. And the first way I use it is a lot with maintenance decisions. Really on a weekly basis, even when I'm not doing it and managing it directly, my property managers, with the number of properties we have, we're always having some kind of maintenance decision to make. I'll give you a couple of examples. Just this last couple of weeks, we had heating and air units that went out, or one that went out in one of our apartments. And so our property manager did a good job of getting several estimates for what it would cost to replace that. But sometimes it's tough to decide, like there might be 2 estimates that are close in price. A third one's a little bit more expensive, but am I comparing apples with apples? Like, how do I really make this decision? So I uploaded all 3 PDFs of those estimates to ChatGPT. I started asking questions. I clarified, here are the things that are most important to me. I know this vendor. I've used them before, so I trust them. These other 2, I don't know quite as well, but I'm open to using them. I want to use the most reliable parts I can. So can you give me an analysis side by side of all 3 of these estimates and help me work through that? What should I be thinking about? What questions should I be asking? You can just ask a prompt like that and then kind of go through a conversation. And I ended up deciding on one that I liked. And there was actually 2 prices that were very similar, but the one that I went with, we looked at the reliability and the record of the brand of what that vendor was installing. We ended up going with that. The other one didn't have quite as a reliable of the brand, and it was a very similar price. So that was how we made that decision. We've also had recently a washing machine went out of one of the apartments. We supply the washer and dryer to them. And so the property manager sent links to 3 different washing machines. And I hate having to make those kind of decisions, but it was over $500 and I had to make the decision. So I put all 3 of those links to Lowe's washing machines into ChatGPT. And I said, help me make this decision. Can you give me a pluses and minuses of each one? Ultimately, it gave me used reviews and ratings and descriptions. Also, one was a little bit smaller than the other. And I decided to go with one, made a quick decision. It was like a 60-second decision instead of something that would have taken me 10, 15, 20 minutes to do a little bit more research on my own. So I do a lot of that, and also just clarifying and educating myself. Anything you're doing, especially if you're new to real estate investing, you're going to bump up into problems or things that you don't understand. And so you can ask the stupidest questions, or what you think about as the stupidest questions that you might not want to ask your property manager or even ask a teacher or somebody else. And you can just ask it and go deep on, educate me on this. How does this work? Why do you have to replace this? What's the lifespan of a hot water heater? This vendor or this contractor is telling me this. Is this right? Can you educate me on that? I mean, that is a gem. It's kind of like Googling something, but on steroids, to really understand and go deep on educating yourself. So maintenance and decisions, I use that a lot. You can also use it though for communication. I recently had to raise rent on a tenant, and we kept it below the full market rent, but I typed up my text or my email that I was going to send, and I asked ChatGPT, can you review this? Give me any tips on how I might be able to soften this or make this come across the best way, because I have to have this conversation with the tenant. Can you help me out? So you can give you feedback on communications. I also like to use it for lease clauses. I'm going to talk in a minute about insurance and other legal documents. But let's say you had a clause that you want to change on your lease. This isn't replacing you having an attorney look at it, but you can brainstorm and have ideas. You can say, my buddy is using this lease and I want to have a mold addendum on mine. Can you give me some examples of some language I could use on a mold addendum based on this example, based on best practices online? And you can just start brainstorming, at least have a first draft that you can then have an attorney or somebody else review for you. So all of these and then many more you can use for AI with property management. A third area I'm using AI a lot in my real estate business is reviewing my insurance and other contracts in my business. And if you thought maintenance and contractors were intimidating or hard to understand sometimes, insurance policies have always been the most dense, difficult thing, at least for me to understand all the nuances and details. So I'll give you a couple stories of how AI and using ChatGPT has really helped me lately. One, we had a situation where my property manager was trying to lease one of our units and emailed me and said, "We have a tenant who's interested in your unit, but they have this breed of dog." I think it was a husky, which I wasn't sure if that was going to be an issue, but they said, is that an issue with your insurance company with this breed of dog? And I said, "I'm not sure. Let me look." And so I uploaded a PDF of my policy to ChatGPT and said, "Hey, can you review my policy and tell me if it's an issue to have this breed or really any breeds of dogs under my policy?" And it came back quickly and said, "Actually, you don't have any coverage for dog bites or that kind of thing." And it referenced which part of my policy that was in, where there was an exception. And so we do not cover dog bites. I said, "That's news to me. Like, shame on me for not knowing that about my policies." I was kind of embarrassed about it. In that particular situation, it was okay for us to do that. But what I told them was you have to have renter's insurance with liability protection for your pet. So that was kind of a short-term fix until we could get a rider to an addendum to our own policy to make sure we cover that kind of thing. So that was something I learned and a mistake I was making just by having ChatGPT help me review it. But then in another situation, was actually had a claim. We had Hurricane Helene hit the Southeast, as many of you know. We didn't get it quite as bad as Western North Carolina, but I did have a couple of trees fall on our properties. One damaged a bedroom and had to do a lot of replacement of rafters in the roof. This other one fell on a garage at one of our properties and damaged the garage. Basically, eventually we decided to demolish the whole garage. But in the process, it took months and months and months for them to get back with us. They finally got back with us, and they eventually did an estimate and said, "All right, here's how much we're going to send you." They sent us a check, but I noticed on the line item of the check they sent, they didn't send any money for removing the tree. So they sent it for all the replacement of the building, but they didn't send it for actually cleaning up the tree. So I called, and they quickly told me, the adjuster said, "No, I don't think that's in your policy, that you don't get reimbursed for that kind of thing." And I said, "Wow, I thought we would." So I quickly looked on ChatGPT, because I'd already uploaded the policy there. Asked it the question, "Hey, is that in my policy? And if so, can you reference where it is?" And it clearly said, "Here it is. You are reimbursed for tree removal if the tree actually hit the property and damaged the property in under question of this policy." And it referenced exactly where it was. So within 2 minutes, called the adjuster back, or email the adjuster, because I wanted everything in writing, and saying, "Here's my policy. Here's where it references it. That's not the case. Can you please send a check?" It took another week or two, but finally we got another check for that. So that's one of those examples. Like before, I probably could have figured it out and followed it, but very quickly resolving problems on really dense documents, particularly with insurance, has been really helpful. The same kind of thing can happen when you're doing deal structuring. And there are so many different agreements, like joint venture agreements with partners, buying property subject to the mortgage, where many of us as investors don't really think through the consequences and all the details of that. And so you can take a deal that you're thinking about, have a conversation with ChatGPT about it, and say, what would be a recommended way to structure this as a JV? Or even better, maybe you can upload a document or get a transcript from a YouTube video you've watched of mine or something, and put that into ChatGPT and say, "I like this general structure of doing a deal this way. Can you apply this situation I'm in to this deal structure and give me some kind of a list of how I might be able to do it?" Like that kind of brainstorming of taking a concept that you learn, translating it to what you're working on right now with creative deal structuring is really helpful. You can do the same thing for reviewing, just like we did with insurance. Review your mortgage documents. If you ever gotten a big, huge, thick commercial mortgage document and you're not sure exactly what it all says, well, you can have the GPT be your assistant to go through it and say, "Give me a list of all the things in this document that are beneficial to me, all the things I should be careful about. Is there anything that's a red flag here?" And you can review that one by one. Again, not replacing. I think ultimately these are making you more educated and giving a list of questions to ask. I still have an attorney on my team who's really an important part of my team, an insurance agent as well. But having educated questions and being able to know what that document says gives you a much better, more productive conversation when you actually do talk to your team members. A fourth area I'm using AI a lot is in the systems and administration of my business. So one example, every year, my business partner and I, for 22 years now, have an annual meeting, as you should for an LLC or a corporation that you have. And I was looking through like the agenda of what we're going to talk about. Some of it's pretty standard that we do every year, but we wanted to update, or I wanted to update our operating agreement or just review it, like to see, we've had a buy-sell clause between us as partners. And honestly, to some of the things our attorney had put in there 20 years ago, I hadn't really thought about since then. So I asked ChatGPT to review my operating agreement and give me some insights. Hey, give me a list of things that are positive and good about my agreement based on best practices. What are some things that might be missing or some things we should think about? And some of them I just kind of like, there's not a big deal. But 2 or 3 of them were like, hey, this is something that would actually be really good that we could add. And so we made a list of things that we wanted to amend our operating agreement. And in particular, I asked for even more help on clarifying what happens if one of us dies. And so we have a buyout clause, which we were happy with, and we're still good with that, on what would happen if the other partner had to buy out the heirs if one of us died. But we had a clause in our LLC operating agreement that neither one of us liked. And it was basically saying that the other partner had to buy out the heirs. And we wanted the opportunity for the heirs to be able, or the existing partner, the remaining partner, to have the option to buy out the heirs. But what if it's a financial, a burden for them to do that, to come up with a lot of money to have to buy them out really quickly? That could be a negative for that leftover partner. So we changed it, and it was pretty simple, but like, I asked for a draft of what's some language we could use to amend that one specific part of the operating agreement. And I was happy with it. I sent it to my business partner. Really simple, but that kind of change or amendment would have been much more difficult if I didn't have a review of using ChatGPT. So super helpful for me. I've also been playing around with it, and this is something early for me, of organizing property data. So if you can take even just like a PDF of documents of a bunch of expenses or past documents you've had for spreadsheets, things like that, just getting data better organized. ChatGPT is really good at that kind of thing. And so I've been playing around with creating kind of a custom process every year on the properties that I self-manage. At the end of the year, I just use a spreadsheet and I go through that and organize the expenses by category. And so I've been working on taking past years that I've done that and saying, hey, here, ChatGPT, here's what I've done in the past. These types of expenses are in this category. This is in this category. Look at what I've already done, and then take this new data and do it the exact same way. So that's working pretty well, about 90% there, but it's saving me hours of time having to go through and just manually organize that data. I've also been using it for checklists and processes. This is something that's really good for if you're, for example, you have a tenant turnover process, or you have some other thing. You could just, with the audio, you could describe what the process is. This is how we normally do this thing. This is what we do when we do the tenant turnover. This is what we do when we have a new property and we're acquiring it, all the things we do. You could just talk it through and say, hey, can you create a checklist based on all those things we do? And it could be a first draft of a checklist. I encourage people a lot in my RPM community to work on creating an operating agreement for your whole business. And so if that's a hurdle for you, if you're like, oh man, I don't want to have to do all this, you can just talk it to ChatGPT and it could create all the documents for you, and at least the first draft of it. And so that's been really cool as a way to take something in your head and make a checklist or process out of it. The fifth way that I've been using AI in my real estate investing business, and perhaps the most valuable to me, is in the area of my portfolio and my overall strategy. And so I'm going to start with portfolio analysis here. I've been working on this. This is kind of another ongoing thing. But if you have a portfolio spreadsheet, so if you have a list of all your properties, if you have a list of the values of your properties, the debt, so a very organized statement of your overall portfolio, which I recommend that you do. And I've been working on updating mine and making sure it's clean and neat. You can do some pretty cool analysis of your portfolio using ChatGPT as an assistant, or maybe on your own as well, of things like return on equity. So if you're a builder, if you're growing in that growth stage of your business, or if you're a harvester and you want to more optimize your portfolio, you can look at property by property and overall to figure out like, what kind of cash flow am I making on the equity I have in my portfolio right now? And over time, your return on equity is going to go down because the property values are going up. The debt is going down on your portfolio. You're building wealth. That's a good thing, right? But it doesn't always mean that return on your equity is as good later on. And in the big picture, like the long run, it might not be the most important metric, but when you're growing as a builder, you really want to pay attention to return on equity, because that is the number one engine, the measurement of how fast you're growing and how efficiently you're using your equity. So if you have $300,000 in equity, you want to turn that into $1 million. If you're making a 5% return on your equity, instead of a 20% return on equity, the length of time from where you are now to get to your goals will be much different depending on one or the other. So doing a portfolio level analysis, and if you have good data, letting ChatGPT help you with that analysis is something that I'm playing around with, and I think is very, very promising. It also can help you once you look at some of your properties and you're like, all right, this one's suboptimal in the return on equity situation. Maybe it's because that property's appreciated a lot over time. I've had some students that I work with who had properties in California and Austin, Texas, where it's just grown like crazy and the rents have not kept up with that. So they're sitting on $1 million or $500,000 in equity on one property. So you might say, should I refinance that property? Should I sell it? Should I pay off the debt on the property? These are some of these harvester kind of moves that I talk about in the book, The Small Mighty Real Estate Investor. Well, which one of those applies to my situation? Well, you can have that kind of discussion. You can maybe share some videos, some transcripts of videos I've done here on YouTube and say, hey, ChatGPT, I want to make a decision on this property like Coach Carson would in the harvester phase. And I want to talk about the pluses and minuses of refinancing, selling, paying off debt, that sort of thing. So you can have a thinking partner to help you think through that. And then I also like just to try to find my blind spots, things I'm not thinking about. That is such a problem that we all have. We have biases. We have decisions we make that are kind of loaded with other motivations. You can just ask open-ended questions saying, look at my portfolio. What are some of the risks I'm not thinking about? Or what risks should I be thinking about? Or, hey, could you stress test this deal? I think it's going to be like this, but can you poke holes in it? Be a devil's advocate. Not only can it be a supportive, assistant, it can be like the devil's advocate who tells you where you're missing things as well. And I think that's a really important partner. And all this comes under the umbrella of thinking partner. And that's why I think it's the most valuable, is that as entrepreneurs, we're kind of alone. We're on an island. And it's one of the reasons I like having a community and working with mentors and coaches like I do in Rental Property Mastery. But having just an assistant who could be your thinking partner, who has a really broad amount of information at its disposal, you can talk about it, about kind of big picture stuff like, hey, here's my why, here's what I'm trying to do. Am I thinking about this right? And just kind of get big picture analysis or feedback. You can also talk about, here's my real estate strategy. I think I'm doing house hacking to accomplish this, or I'm going into short-term rentals for this reason. Can you kind of push back or give me some thinking on that? You can just go back and forth like you would with a smart, considerate partner who's not going to judge you for what you're talking about. And this has been kind of a joke with my wife. She's always like, I think you got a new best friend, talking to ChatGPT all the time. And I'll when I'm walking in the neighborhood, I'm sitting there talking on the thing, just discussing things and bouncing ideas off of it. And I think that's a really valuable aspect of ChatGPT, is basically getting inside your own head and having somebody who will give you feedback. And then the end result of that is hopefully clearer thinking, or maybe you're finding ideas, places where your thinking is weak, and you can go try to strengthen that and learn more, ask follow-up questions to other people. Super, super valuable as a different benefit of using AI. So this Coach's Corner episode went a little longer than I anticipated, but I hope the details of sharing how I'm using AI has been helpful. My mindset is that AI is not a silver bullet, is not a magic thing that's going to solve every single problem in your real estate investing business, but I am super optimistic about it. I think it can accentuate, it can kind of help you with the strengths that you have. So whatever you're good at, it's going to make you even better at that. It's also, if you use it well, can help cover some of your weaknesses. It can identify blind spots, things that you're not doing as well. It's almost like an assistant you can outsource things to that you're not quite as good at or you don't like doing as much. And I have a few different takeaways I want to leave you with about AI. Number one, I'm a student of the game, so I'm learning here. So I would love to hear from you in the comments if you have suggestions, if you have ways you're using AI productively as a real estate investor. I'm learning. I like to learn. So I would love to hear from you. The second takeaway from me is that you can get better at the skill of using AI. And I think this is going to be one of the number one skills, not just in real estate investing, but just in general across the economy, is how good are you at asking questions? Those are called prompts with AI. And how good are you at training your AI? So this is something I'm really learning a lot about and studying. And the number three takeaway is that the best way to study this and learn this and be on the cutting edge of this is to be around other investors who are doing this as well. And so I created a community called Rental Property Mastery a couple of years ago. And this is the place where I'm spending a bunch of time and I'm learning from other small and mighty investors who are using AI, who are building their systems. We focus a lot on paperwork, on systems, on checklists, on improving how you buy properties, how you finance them, how you manage them. And AI is really at the center of a lot of that, and using tools like that to make you a better real estate investor. So if you are interested in hanging out online and also in person, we have in-person retreats now in my community called Rental Property Mastery. I would love to invite you there. I do a lot of coaching and teaching there as well. email. And you can check it out and find out more details at coachcarson.com/RPM. We do have an application. We're looking for people who are either an intermediate to more advanced stage of rental investing. And so once you apply, we would love to hear from you and talk to you just to make sure you're a good fit. And if you are, I would love to talk to you soon. We can have a one-on-one call or to see you on some of the group discussions inside the community. So if you like this video and you want to watch more, I want to recommend my next video, which is called How to Analyze a Duplex Rental Property, a Real Life Example. This is me sharing my screen step by step on a real duplex in my area and sharing how I think about it, how I run the numbers. You actually get the formula and the spreadsheet that I'm using in that video if you want to download that for free as well. So this is one of the good principles you can learn about using AI is if you understand how to analyze a deal yourself, you can ask better questions, better prompts. There's this principle of garbage in, garbage out. So if you ask better questions and you understand how to analyze a deal even better yourself, you'll be able to use AI even better. So check that out. You can click on the thumbnail above me here to go to that video, or you can click on a link in the podcast or the YouTube description below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.